So we begin today's class. Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jeevanam Kavibiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadaatatam Bhuryanantiye Bhurida Janaha. Now, Sri Ramakrishna is telling Hajra, why do you call the pure Atman Ishvara God? I mean, Hajra had just remarked that pure Atman is nothing but Ishvara. The pure Atman is beyond all action. This is what Sri Ramakrishna is telling. He says the pure Atman is beyond all action. It cannot be tainted by any action. The actions are in Prakriti. And Ishvara is the highest form of Prakriti at the causal level. As we studied earlier, that there are three levels: gross, subtle, and the causal. At the gross level, that same Ishvara is known as Virat. So Virat is the gross form of God. God or Brahman. Brahman, when it manifests itself, when Prakriti manifests, Parama Prakriti manifests as Prakriti and creates the whole universe, the gross, all the gross forms put together, all the universes, the multiverses, everything put together is nothing but it is given the name Virat. The same God, if you want to make the sum total of all the existences, subtle existences, it includes the subtle body, all the subtle bodies, whether you have a gross body or not. Suppose you have a gross body, then you are part of the Virat, but suppose a person dies and he lives only in the subtle body. So till such time he gets a gross body, he is part of another existence which is slightly higher, the sum total of all subtle bodies or subtle existences, individual existences, which is known as the second level, which is known as Hiranyagarbha. So Hiranyagarbha, the literal translation is golden womb. Mother's womb is not like any other womb of any other mother. It's golden. Golden in the sense it's bright, shining, resplendent. And because it is subtle, because it has nothing gross, even the black holes and all the universes and multiverses which we see, they are secondary and insignificant compared to this golden Hiranyagarbha. So that's why in the Ishopanishad also, the beautiful creation, they say it's a golden orb. I mean, the word Hiranyagarbha, Garbha means the womb from which creation has sprung. But that this is the subtle part of the womb, not the gross womb of the universe. It's the subtle. That's why it's known as Hiranya. Hiranya means golden. So golden womb is the sum total of all the subtle bodies, the subtle existences, which is the Pranamaya Kosha, the Manomaya Kosha, the Vijnanamaya Kosha, and everything. But at a third level, as Sri Ramakrishna, which Hajra is trying to equate with Brahman, is the Ishvara. What is Ishvara? Ishvara is the sum total of the causal bodies. Everybody has a subtle gross body. Everybody has a subtle body. Everybody has a causal body also. But the people who are not living in the gross body, who are, say, in the subtle body, who have just died or maybe who have not yet been reborn in the gross body, they are part of Hiranyagarbha, and that even superior to that is the Ishvara, where is the sum total of all causal bodies. That's why when we pray to Ishvara, because our root cause of all our problems and joys and sorrows, everything that we are today is because of our causal existence, and that causal existence is something mysterious for us. A subtle body we can have a glimpse, or even we can even have an experience, but to understand the causal body, only Ishvara or one who is an incarnation can understand. That is what is meant by Sri Ramakrishna could see the past, present and future of everybody. How could he see it? Because he sees the causal body. He doesn't see the gross body. By seeing the gross body, you cannot predict the future of anybody. He may look healthy, he may look everything, but Sri Ram Krishna used to know that this person is not going to live long, or this person is going to live long, this person is going to do this person is going to do that. How does he know? Not by even seeing the subtle body, because even the subtle body doesn't tell you the future. Only thing is, if you can look at the causal body and see the samskaras, so that is possible only for the Ishvara. The mind of Ishvara or the Ishvara himself knows, because being one with Ishvara, he can have a experience of the all the causal bodies. So he knows exactly what is the role of which person. What will M do, the recorder of the gospel? What will Naren do? What will Swami Vivekananda, what is his role? How long he will live? What is his role on this earth? So everything Sri Ram Krishna knew. That's why Swamiji said, I never doubt the judgment of this old man. Old man means he was referring to Thakur. And he said Thakur's judgment was never wrong, because he never spoke from either the subtle level or the gross level as we do. He spoke from the even from above the causal level, and causal level he could see as clear as daylight, as we see the gross body. Now, Thakur is telling him, why do you call this pure Atman Ishvara? Ishvara is after the Brahman manifests as creation. It has nothing to do with Atman. Atman is, and he gives a beautiful example how to make the how to make the distinction between Brahman and Ishvara. He says, the pure Atman or Brahman is beyond all action. It is only a witness to the three states. Now, you can describe as gross, subtle, and causal existences as waking, dream, and deep sleep states also. Because waking state, you need the gross body. Only when you perceive the gross body when you are waking. But in a dream state, though your gross body may be there, you can take up any body. In the dream, you'll see so many shapes and forms you can take. You don't need a gross body, you don't need the eyes, everything is closed, but still you can see the dream. So, dream is the subtle existence, and causal existence is deep sleep. So, beyond deep sleep, dream, and waking state is what is Atman, Brahman. Brahman is a witness to all these states, but it is not one of these three states. So when Hajra made a mistake, Hajra remarked that Brahman is Ishvara, he said, how can it be? Brahman cannot be Ishvara. Ishvara is a lower state. He is the sum total of causal existences, only when the manifestation has started. But the Brahman is beyond everything. He is just a witness. He is not affected by the creation, dissolution, or destruction of anything, gross, subtle, or causal. All existences, gross, subtle, or causal, will be born and will die. Even the gross will die, even the subtle will die, and even the causal will one day merge and die. So, the only thing that doesn't die is the Atman or Brahman, which is the witness of all the three states. It is like waking, dream, deep sleep, and then Turiya. Turiya state is the witness of even deep sleep. When a person is deep in sleep, it is who is watching? Somebody is watching that. You know the feeling, you get the feeling when you get up, oh, I had a wonderful sleep. Now who was watching? How do you know that there was a good sleep tonight? I suppose I sleep nicely, and in the morning, if I get a feeling that I've slept well, there was some witness. That witness is the Turiya. But we do it unconsciously. In ignorance, we sleep. So when we get up, we again come back to the waking state, and then and for some time we may have a dream state. But still, the sleeping state, the deep sleep state, is not Turiya. Turiya is something beyond. Because in Turiya state, you have
প্রতি বছর যদি কিনতে হয় হ্যাঁ ইকরা প্লাস্টিকের কানটা কিনলে সারা জীবন চলে যাবে।
I think there is some problem. 1 minute. Okay. So to come back to the discussion, Sri Ramakrishna is trying to correct Hajra by saying that Brahman or the Atman inside all of us, which is a common existence, is a witness to all the states. It cannot be Ishvara. It cannot be Ishvara. It cannot be Hiranyagarbha. It cannot be Virat. Virat may be a sum total of the gross existences. It may be sum total of everything that we see, but it is definitely not Brahman. Brahman has to be beyond that. So, what is pure self like? Now, Sri Ramakrishna knows that if I tell these abstract things, even intelligent people do not understand. So, what about the common man? So, he gives a beautiful example. Many people have seen the magnet. So, he says the pure self, you see how Sri Ramakrishna thinks of these things. Maybe he has seen the magnet once in his lifetime. He was not a science student that he would have been in the laboratory or did some rational thinking. Perhaps somebody would have shown him a magnet and a magnetic needle or something which is the magnet attracts. Those days science was being discussed, and maybe M or somebody, even Narendra or somebody must have shown Sri Ramakrishna the magnet. But he has seen it and he gives this example here. He says the pure self is like a magnet. It is lying at a distance. It doesn't do anything, but the needle still moves towards it. The magnet itself remains unmoved, actionless. So that is a very subtle way of explaining. If Brahman is totally actionless, then what is the purpose? What will we gain by attaining that, by realizing Brahman? He gives the answer that a magnet appears to be very stationary, but you see the tremendous force. By the force of Brahman, Prakriti acts. Prakriti takes the causal existence, causal body, that is Ishvara, then it becomes subtle, that is Hiranyagarbha, and when it becomes gross, we call it Virat. So and individual level also, we go from Turiya state. Turiya state is the state where that is the awareness which observes our deep sleep state. We are aware of our deep sleep. We are aware of our dream. We are also aware of our waking state. So whether it is Sukshma, Sthula and Karana, or whether it is deep sleep, dream and waking, all the states are witnessed by our innermost core, which is Brahman, which is not Ishvara. But when we want to grasp the thing which we cannot grasp through our minds, we take the help of Ishvara. That's why we worship incarnations, we worship our Ishta, and hope that by worshipping him, by his grace, by Ishvara's grace, we will go and attain our identity or reach Brahman. Now the magnet itself is actionless, Sri Ramakrishna says. Then the next chapter, we come to the next chapter now. Now Sri Ramakrishna it's almost evening. Thakur is taking a stroll. He was just walking in the Dakshineshwar campus and seeing Mani. Mani here is Master Mashay. He used to change his name. Sometimes he will say M, sometimes he will say Mani, sometimes he will use some other name. He has used 3 or 4 names in the gospel just to hide himself. But this Mani means actually it is M. Seeing Mani sitting all alone and meditating, he suddenly addresses him lovingly. Now Thakur comes. He was just walking and he saw, because Thakur liked to walk alone, so perhaps, or he normally walked alone. So Master Mashay thought, let me not disturb him, and he was meditating. But Thakur goes to him and lovingly addresses him, says, please bring me 1 or 2 coarse shirts. Coarse means in those days there was 2 types of textiles available. One was the handmade or the handloom shirts, which gave jobs to the weavers, the poor weavers. They used to make a rough type of cloth, and there was a milk cloth which used to be imported from England. Even that was there. Fine cloth was also available. That's why Thakur is intentionally saying, I want the coarse cloth and just bring 1 or 2 shirts, because Mani knew his tailor perhaps, and he knew the size of Thakur's clothes. Then he says, I can't accept shirts brought by everybody. Because Thakur never would ask anything. He was a man of renunciation. But he says, I was thinking of asking Captain Upadhyay. There were a few people whom he would unhesitatingly ask for some things, his basic needs. He didn't have many needs, just one or two coarse shirts, perhaps they were torn, so he wanted this shirt. And I was thinking of asking Captain, but you may give them to me. Getting up, he says immediately, he was meditating, but seeing Thakur approaching him and asking, he was really pleasantly surprised. Of course, Thakur did not want to disturb him because he knew he was not earning much, and he knew Captain was more or less a very had an important post, and he was earning a good salary. So he says normally I tell Captain to bring, because after the passing away of Mathur Babu, for his small needs, the simple needs, he used to depend on some very, very close and good devotees. One of them was Captain. So M is happy that Thakur has asked him to bring two. It is twilight. Now he is describing see the beautiful description which M is giving now. Because it's evening, incense is burnt in Sri Ramakrishna's room. He bows down to the pictures of gods and goddesses, having repeated his Bija mantra. He chants the names of God. There is a unique splendor outside the room. It is the 7th day of the bright fortnight of the month of Kartik, and the pure rays of the moon falling on the temple appears make it smile. Now, how can the pure rays smile? But if you are sensitive, you can see nature speaking to you. There are people, even Thakur, when he heard birds uh, chirping, he used to just watch them as if he is listening to their discussion. It is possible that when you are in tune with nature, so M is having that kind of feeling. He says, the pure rays of the moon falling on the temple seemed to make it smile. How can a temple smile? But the pure rays of the moon, they gave an appearance. It was just becoming, it was dusk and the moon had perhaps risen. And then he says, as well, ripples play on the surface of the Ganges, which is rising and falling sweetly like a sleeping baby's chest. Now you see the comparison he is doing. Suppose a bare-bodied, most of the babies in Bengal, because of the heat, they would not be wearing clothes. So you can distinctly see a baby lying on its back and it's sleeping. The chest slowly goes up and down. Unlike the adults whose breathing is a bit heavy, the children breathe very smoothly, especially when it is a young baby. So the Ganga was so calm and quiet, and somehow he compares it with the ups and downs of the when the sleeping baby breathes. So gently the Ganga was flowing. There were no rough waves there. It was a smooth flow, but a small ripples which float made the water go up and down. The flood tide is over. The sound of Arati mixed with a melodious murmuring of the bright and refreshing current of the Ganga loses itself in the distance. There was an echo. Normally, if you hear the music, you will find the cymbals and the Arati sound making echoes on the surface and as if it is traveling. Even in Belur Math, we could hear sometimes, if everything was quiet, you could hear the Arati from across the Ganga. There are so many temples across the Ganga, and one could hear the wonderful sound of the Arti as if it is floating on the surface of the river. That's why he says, and it loses itself in the distance. Three Artis are being performed at the same time in the temples, the Kali temple, Vishnu temple, and each of the Shiva temples. 12 Shiva temples were there. So they were all in a very big campus, and all the Artis, that was the unique thing, would go on simultaneously. So there would be a big bell sound everywhere, the tinkling of the bell, and that produced a wonderful rippling effect. The sound uh, passed over the flow of Ganga, and it just as if it merged into silence after losing itself in the distance. The priest of the Shiva temples go from one temple to other. He holds the bell in his left hand and a lamp with 5 wicks, Arti, in the right. The attendant carries cymbals. So the attendant rings the cymbals, where the priest goes with on one hand he has a bell, another hand he does Arti, Perhaps the rule was that they would do Aarti in the first Shiva temple, second, third, fourth, and continuously the Aarti would go until all the 12 temples are covered. So the sweet sound and symphony of the Shehnai and the other instruments from the southwest corner of the compound is heard. Evening music is being played from the music pavilion, that is Nahabat. Nahabat, on the top of the Nahabat, which had where Holy Mother used to stay, above that there was a enclosure, and that is where they used to make the conch sounds, and they used to play Shehnai. When the Aarti was going on, the beautiful Shehnai, somebody would go and play that. And then Sri Ram Krishna's, you see the beautiful expression which M is giving now. A perpetual festival of all blissful mother reminds the devotees never to be unhappy. You see, Master Mashe came in a very suffocated state. He was very unhappy. He was struggling with some of the domestic problems. But he found so much solace in this beautiful campus of Dakshineshwar that he is seeing peace and happiness in the bell, in the water, in the moonlight, anything that he says in the campus. It's not that the moonlight is not there when he goes back to his house, it is still there. But the atmosphere of his house is not conducive to such meditations. Whereas when he comes to Dakshineshwar, he sees all these things. And even in this natural scenery which he sees around him, the same Ganga is flowing in Calcutta, but in Dakshineshwar it has a different charm because of the mental state which Sri Ram Krishna induces in his devotees. And he says, a perpetual festival is going on here in Dakshineshwar, and the blissful mother is going on, and reminds devotees never to be unhappy. As long as they are here, they cannot be unhappy. There are joys and sorrows in the world. Let them be. The mother of the universe, our mother, is here. Rejoice. The son of the maid of the house hasn't enough to eat, hasn't enough to wear. No house, no here. Now he's talking not of Thakur, and of course, he is referring to Thakur also because he doesn't possess anything. He has no house. He has just been allowed to stay in that Dakshineshwar room. He has no possessions, no wealth, nothing. He hasn't enough to wear. Just 2 shirts, that also he has to ask Master Mashe to bring him 2 shirts. No house, no earth, no family. Even then, there is courage within. He has his mother. Now, what gives him courage? So, M feels that even in spite of not having anything, no money, no children, no family, absolutely nothing to wear, nothing to eat. I mean, very little, very sparse thing. Whatever little he got, he ate. He didn't have a money, didn't keep money. No house, the room was there. And when he is asked to leave, he has to leave that room. He was just living there as he was, even though he was not working as a priest at that time. Now he says, the son of the maid of the house hasn't enough to eat, hasn't enough to wear, no house, no earth. Even then, there is courage within. He has his mother. He is fearless in the lap of his mother. She is not a stepmother. She is the real mother. Who am I? From where have I come? What will happen to me? Where will I go? All this he is not bothered, only mother knows. Now that is the attitude of a baby. When a baby is in the pram or maybe it's in the lap of the mother, it doesn't have to bother when it will get its food, when the child will get the food. The baby just has to cry. It doesn't bother about. So he is comparing Sri Ram Krishna to a baby or a child of the universal mother or mother. And he is fearless because the child, just as a child is fearless, as long as it is in the lap of the mother, it knows nobody can harm him. The mother is there to protect him. So she is not a stepmother. She is a real mother. Who am I? Gyanis asked this question. But he doesn't ask. He just, when some Gyanis came and were discussing Vedanta in front of Sri Ramakrishna, he told them, I don't want to bother myself with all these things. that jnata, gyeya. There are three things: the knower, the known, and the knowing. So that is the process of perception, how it takes place in Vedanta. They are trying to explain. Oh, we see a thing, there is a knower who is aware of the knowledge which he sees outside, and then there is a link connecting the known and the knower, and so many confusing things were there. So Sri Krishna, some Pandit once came and asked Sri Krishna, do you know this is what Vedanta believes in? There is a knower which is inside, there is something known which is outside, and the knowledge which is connecting the two. So then Thakur was not interested in the discussion of Jnana. He says, I don't know. Maybe it is there in the scriptures. I don't care because I know only one thing, I and my mother. Bas, that's all. I don't bother to learn all these things, how perception takes place. I just know that who am I? From where have I come? These are questions which a Jnani asks. Vedanta tries to answer that, and people spend years and years listening to that, trying to understand, figure it out, how one came into existence, what is subtle body, what is causal body. He says, I don't know. Who am I? From where have I come? What will happen to me? Where will I go? Is not even bothered what will happen tomorrow. So he says, all this the mother knows. Why bother the mind about it? Why spend the mind in anxiety? Why use the mind in anxiety? We don't have to be anxious, because if you depend on mother, then why should you be anxious? So he says, my mother knows, my mother who has made me a body, she has made my mind, my life, myself. I don't even want to know. If it is necessary, she will tell me. Why worry about it so much? All children of mother rejoice. Now, this is what M is thinking. See, here is a child of mother. He's looking at Thakur and he gets that strange feeling. See, it's not something which everybody can see because of his sensitive nature, his keen observation. When he sees Thakur having no money even to buy two shirts, he's asking him to buy two shirts, depending on his charity, and not even depending on anything, no house of his own, just the room where he stays, a simple bed, a mosquito net maybe. So with so much, still, how come he is so fearless? So he's comparing it with a baby. Even the baby, when the mother is near, it will even challenge anybody. Say, because it knows that my mother is there behind me. I'm in the lap of the mother. Who can do anything to me? So much of dependence, so much of faith in mother, that gives you fearlessness. That's why he says he is real courage, because though he has nothing outside, but there is full of courage within. That's what Sri Krishna that appears to M. M sees Sri Krishna as a fearless child in the lap of his mother. And he doesn't bother if whatever is necessary for him to know, he just asks mother and mother teaches him, tells him. So that is how all his wisdom comes. So, bathed in moonlight, the world outside is smiling. Now you see the same M who once upon a time, maybe a few months ago, came to commit suicide in that same river. At that time, he did not see the river as smiling. The situation is same. He's seeing the same river. But you see, now his attitude has changed. The river which would have taken his life, he was prepared to die and give up his life in that. Had he not met Sri Krishna, he would have died. And now he says, within a month, you see the transformation. Bathed in moonlight, the world outside is smiling. Now, the world neither smiles nor is sorrowful. It's our mind which smiles, but his mind is smiling. He is in a good mood. That's why he says, the world outside is smiling. Wherever I see, the moonbeams are smiling, the temple is smiling, the river is smiling. Inside his room, Sri Krishna is seated, filled with the bliss of God's love. Ishan has come from Calcutta. More conversation about God takes place. Ishan has great faith. He says, with a trident in his hand, Shiva accompanies one who goes on a journey with the name of Durga on his lips. Now that's why when we undertake a journey, when we leave the car, there is a tradition Jai Sri Guru Maharaj Ji ki Jai, Mahamai ki Jai, Swamiji Maharaj Ji ki Jai, and then finally Durga Mai ki Jai. So there is a very strong belief that if you start on your journey with Durga's name on your lips, then Shiva himself comes with a trident and protects you from any harm. So what is there to fear from misfortune when Shiva himself is the guardian of one who repeats Durga's name, one who depends on mother? The idea is that Shiva himself comes and protects such a person. Now, attain the new heading is, now this is M, what is M feeling now? Attainment of God through faith. Instructions on Karma Yoga to Ishan. Ishan, you should remember, is a very rich person and he used to do a lot of charity and other things. So Thakur loved him very much. So he's trying to give him some advice and tell him what is the purpose of charity. What is, just because you are giving a few 100,000 rupees every month, that doesn't mean. So he's explaining the true meaning of Karma Yoga, how it should be done, how it should not be done. Ramakrishna to Ishan, you have firm faith. I don't have that much. He's just laughing because Ishan used to say that I have full faith in God. Thakur was very humble. He knew that no, if a person has faith, he will never boast in front of everybody that I have faith. He'll quietly have faith and live on that faith. But a person who doesn't have anything, he'll go on saying, oh, I have faith, I have faith. But moment some trouble comes, he'll lose all the faith. So it is joking, and because Ishan used to perhaps come and tell that I have so much faith in mother, everything, but that may be just lip service. It's not just what he really believed in. So Thakur wanted to teach him or make fun. He said, you have firm faith. I don't have that much. All laugh. One can realize him by that faith alone. Then Ishan says, yes, sir. He knew that Sri Ramakrishna is making a bit little fun. It is. Then he says, Sri Ramakrishna is saying, you perform repetition of the name, daily puja, observe fast, perform Purush Charana. Purush Charana means you decide that today I'll do so many thousand of japa. Or you decide, Purush Charana means you decide that from morning sunrise to sunset, I will sit in one place and do japa. So there are so many types. Maybe somebody will take a. So that is known as Purush Charana. So he says, you do all these things, you do rituals, you are a very ritualistic person. That's all wonderful. This is very good. God makes one who has sincere attraction for him do all these things. If one is able to perform them all without desire for their fruits, then one surely attains him. But he gives a condition. If you are doing these rituals, don't do with the intention of getting some fruit, some worldly benefit. If you do it, then you will not be able to attain him. So, what is the role of ritualistic devotion? Rituals, Sri Ramakrishna never criticized. Otherwise, he would have himself not done all the rituals. But he is trying to tell Ishan, who was very much attached to all these pujas and very, very big elaborate rituals, that know the essence of the ritual and then do it. There is love. And where the should do this puja, those things, do kind of devotion. Come out especially of an especially deep love of God, as Prahlada had. When one does this rituals, that means he's showing that certain phase when you are not yet mature, these rules have a place. But once you know the heart of the disciple. Now, what is this? What is this heart of the disciple? Now, these are very important things. M is trying to repeat. I think Sri Ramakrishna is making M repeat this story because this was discussed earlier. We discussed the Rama's will. The famous story of Rama's will. Everything happened by Rama's will. I was caught. I was put in jail. and then again the judge, seeing his simplicity, released him. That story, Sri Ramakrishna is perhaps reminded. So he is recollecting this story. And he says, before evening, Mani means M, strolling in the temple garden as he recalls the story of Rama's will. This is very beautiful, he thought. It solves the confusion between predestination and free will. Now, there is a confusion, and we don't know if there is predestination or free will. Are we free to do whatever we like, or everything is destined? Now, this problem has never been solved. Some people say, no, you have the will, you can change your destiny. Swamiji, especially, if you see, he says man is the maker of his own destiny. In fact, he used to tell everybody, the youths, that you don't think God will come and help you. But then there is another school which says, or another type of people, group of people who says everything is predestined. We just have to surrender to God and they will do everything for us. The Ishta will do everything for us. So now there is this confusion is solved by the story of Rama's. Now M is trying to recollect what Sri Ramakrishna said a few conversations ago and trying to reconcile these two views. Some people favor the second view. Those who are very strong and those who have no problems, they will say, no, we will decide our own destiny. We are strong enough. But when they get blows, they'll say, oh, no, let mother's will prevail. Now that is a kind of confusion. Because as long as things go very smoothly, we don't need help. And that's what the mother also does. When the child is happy with his toys, she doesn't want to disturb. Said, you just play. Don't bother about the mother. But when you are hungry, just tell me, I'll come and help you or feed you. So now this reconciliation, whether one should believe in free will or whether one should believe in predestination. And at what stage one should believe in predestination and what stage we should believe in free will. This is addressed or answered by M quoting a story which Sri Ramakrishna told earlier. It solves the confusion between predestination and free will, between liberty and necessity. I was captured by the robbers because of Rama's will. Now you see very carefully how he is logically establishing that both are important. He says, he means this Rama, the person who was captured by the robbers and forced to commit robbery without his wish. I was captured by the robbers because of Rama's will. I was smoking, and that too by Rama's will. He was just having a smoke. They saw he's a lazy person, he is sitting here doing nothing, let us take him and he can help us to steal. And this poor fellow gave up his smoking and went with them without even knowing what they are going to do with him. And he says, I was smoking, that too by Rama's will. Now you see, when you say Rama's will, then good things also you have to ascribe. When something good happens, he says, oh, that is all Thakur's will. But something bad happens, then we don't say, oh, that is also by Thakur's will. But he was happy. So when you say it is Sri Ramakrishna's will or our Ishta's will or divine will, then you have to be consistent. You should not say, if you get a good sweet or a nice money, oh, that is, I have got all these things because Thakur, because of my Lord's will, my Ishta's will, as if the Ishta has no other job but to give you money. So, but when you get sorrow, can you say that same thing? Can you say, don't worry, I'll bear all the suffering? Because when I get money, I was so happy and I thought God is giving me all this money. But God also will give you sorrow. And then at that time, are you in a position to say that it is God's will? So that is what this story is telling. This person, he did not bother. You see, he did not go with the robbers. He knew that ultimately it is Lord's will and he will save me. He had that firm faith. So he says, I went with them. I was held by the police. I committed a theft by Rama's will. I mean, he did not commit, but he was forced to commit. Because he thought it was Rama's will, even this bad action which he did inadvertently really became Rama's will. And then he by the police, that also by the Rama's will. I have become a sadhu by Rama's will. I pray, oh Lord, may my mind be not impure. May you not goad me to commit robbery. The only prayer he does is, You see, I did all these things, but please see that I don't do those things. So even to do good things, we have to pray to Lord so that we don't do bad things. He does everything. He can do good through you, he can do bad through you. But the story says that predestination means you have the power to pray to Lord and say that please don't get these evil things done by me. That too is Rama's will. The right and the wrong desire are both given by him. Even so, there is a special point. Now, Sri Ramakrishna is saying, M is pointing out, why should he give us wrong understanding? Now, the logic is, if both are his will, then why should he give us wrong understanding? Why should he give the desire to commit robbery? In answer to this, Thakur beautifully said, just as he has made the lion, the tiger, and the snake among animals, just as he has made poisonous trees among others, similarly he has also made thieves among men. Why has he made them? Who can tell? Who can understand God's ways? It's not possible to understand. But then, if God has made everything, now this is the argument, our responsibility ends. So if you really believe that God has done everything, then you don't feel responsible. But that applies to your good actions also. If you take the credit for doing good actions, that, oh, I've helped so many people, I've done this, I've done that. Then if you commit bad things, then you should be in a position to say that, oh, I did that, that is why I'm so, that is why but the responsibility ends if God has made everything. But why would it end? Unless you have realized God, unless you had his vision, you cannot have that 100% faith. And as long as you don't have full faith, you'll certainly have the feeling of vice and virtue and the feeling of responsibility. Now, the feeling of responsibility makes you assert your self-will. If I feel I'm responsible for some people or somebody, then I'll work. Otherwise, how will I work? That's the whole plan of creation. God gives us the sense of responsibility till we realize him. And we cannot be free from that sense of responsibility which he has given us. That is also God's will, but he has given that sense of responsibility so that you think that you are doing this out of free will. The mother thinks, oh, without me, the child will suffer. So it will go on. The mother will keep on loving the child, doing everything for him, because the mother feels that this is my responsibility. So as long as you feel it is your responsibility, Sri Ramakrishna says, you are on the way to realize God. But if you realize God, then it will be only his will, not my will. So as long as you don't have full faith, you have to take the responsibility for your good and bad actions, vice and virtue. Thakur has explained what Rama's will is. Repeating Rama's will like a parrot won't do. As long as you don't know God, as long as my will and his will do not become one, as long as you don't have the full understanding that instrument, he is the doer, so long as he retains the knowledge of vice and virtue, joy and sorrow, purity and impurity, good and bad, and the sense of responsibility in you, as long as you have not reached that stage. Otherwise, how can this world of Maya go on? If everybody thought it is God's will, then the whole world will come to a standstill. So God deliberately, according to M, Thakur wants to say that God has deliberately put a sense of responsibility. Otherwise, the world cannot be. It is his play, no doubt. You can't ask why he has put it. There's no explanation for that. But the very fact that he has every one of us the individuality to do as we want, that kind of freedom he has given. Thakur used to give a beautiful example. Somebody asked, how far we are free? How is our free will totally free? Is it 100% free? Now, you see, one of the best answers, I don't know whether Thakur has quoted from the scriptures, because you don't get this from any scripture. He has just observed the cows grazing, and in Bengal, the cows, and because they would go in search of grass, better and better grass and they will go away from that's why they have been tied with a long rope in the farm or in the fields. And the farmer ensures that it has enough rope so that it can go within that diameter or radius and eat whatever grass is there. It doesn't, it has a very long rope. So he says that is the free will which God has given us. He has given us some free will to eat the grass as long as the rope extends. But once the rope comes to an end, then it cannot go beyond. Beyond that is God's grace. And then Thakur gives a wonderful example. He says, Thakur says that God sometimes becomes very liberal and he loosens the rope and he says, okay, you have eaten this grass, now I'll make your rope a little longer. So that is grace. We have tried our best and we have not succeeded. And if we have really tried, we have finished the end length of the rope and the cow is desperate. He says, see, you have given me only this length of rope. I have tried my best, but I can't go beyond. So the God, Thakur says, the farmer kindly comes and says, okay, I'll release it a little more. And then he makes the rope a little longer so that the cow can. So as you go on deserving by your sadhana, more sadhana you do, Thakur becomes, our Ishta becomes gracious and he allows us more and more freedom, more and more free will. So that is the difference between free will and predestination. Now, the more I think of Sri Ramakrishna's love of God, the more I am struck with wonder. This is M's remark. Keshav Sen repeats the name of Hari and meditates on God, so he, Thakur, immediately runs to meet him. Keshav at once becomes his own. Then he did not listen to Captain's objection that Keshav went to a foreign land, ate with white men, gave his daughter in marriage to a different caste. All these things, I take only cherries. I have nothing to do with thorns. So that is Sri Ramakrishna's greatness. He could see a person from his good side. Every tree has fruits and has thorns. But Sri Ramakrishna would go after the cherries. Why should I bother about how many thorns Keshav has? He may be having some problems, but does he love God? Yes. If he loves God, he is my own. So that's why many people would not understand. We reject people because of one or two faults they have. We don't see the positive side of human beings. So Sri Ramakrishna was so liberal that he could see only the positive side. And if that side, even if there is a fraction of goodness in somebody, love for God, Thakur used to go all the way to see them. He didn't wait for them to come to him. He himself used to go. So he met so many people, even Dayanand Saraswati and so many people. Though he did not fully agree with them, he knew there was some rajas in Dayanand Saraswati, but still he told Hriday, I have heard he's a great lover of God. Let us go and meet him. So without any ego, though Thakur was such a great person, he would go and meet them because he loved to be in the company. He could not live without the company of his people who loved God. So that's why he says, anybody who loves God becomes his own. Then he did not listen to captains. Captain said, don't go to Keshav. He has done this, he has done that. He has married his daughter to a person of another caste because of money. He has broken the caste rules and he has gone to the West. And in those days, going to the West was a taboo. So he said, I don't care. I take only the cherries. I have nothing to do with thorns. In the bond of love for God, believers in God with form and believers in God without form are united. Now, Thakur has united all these people. Some people love God, some people love God with form, some people love like Gyanis, they love God without form. But still, Thakur has united both and brought them on a common platform. Now, all are united. Hindus, Muslims, Christians, all are united. Also, the four castes. Love of God, be victorious. Blessed you are, Sri Ramakrishna. Victory to you. Jai Sri Ramakrishna. You are embodied the universal spirit of Sanatana Dharma, eternal religion. It is perhaps for this reason that you hold such attraction. You embrace the followers of all religions as your own without any difference. You have but one test, love for God. The only thing that mattered to Sri Ramakrishna, that one should love God, whatever be the conception of God he has. He may be a Muslim, he may be a Christian. Does he love God? Then he is my own. You see, you only see if a person has that within, if he has devotion. Sri Ramakrishna could see. He did not bother about the externals. He saw this person has devotion. He didn't bother if Girish Ghosh was drinking, he was a drunkard, or he was behaving in a very immoral manner. But he saw the inside of Girish Ghosh was full of love of God. So something, he could see things which normal human beings don't see. So he says, if there is the devotion in within the heart of anybody, inside the heart of anybody, immediately becomes your own very own. Your means Thakur's very own. If you see love of God in a Hindu, he is once your own. If in a Muslim has the same love for Allah, he is also your own. So you may say, if a Christian has love for Jesus, he is also your near and dear one. That's what M has found in Sri Ramakrishna. You say that all rivers come from different directions, flow into the one and same ocean. Thakur does not consider this world as a dream. Now, this is very significant. Unlike Vedantins who would like to consider this world as a dream, if that were so, it would lose weight. He is now recollecting what Thakur said about the bale fruit. He gave that wonderful example. Thakur said, nobody goes to the shop and says, I want the pulp of the bale. The person will weigh the whole bale fruit and give you. He won't give you, remove the skin, seed, and say, I'll pay only for the bale fruit, the bale pulp. So he says, if we believe that only Brahman is real and Prakriti is not real, or this world is a dream, then the complete story, the complete reality is not understood. Is it not the doctrine of illusion? It is not the doctrine of illusion. It is the doctrine of qualified non-dualism. That is Vishishtadvaita. He does not consider the individual soul and the world imaginary. He does not think they are illusions. God is real, and so also are men and the world real. Brahman is qualified by living beings and the world. You cannot get the whole of a bale fruit if you take away its seeds and the shell. Now, the most beautiful passage comes. I'll close after that. It's such a beautiful passage. One has to understand this. I'll just read it this time. It will require a lot of explanation, so I'll explain it next time. But you just hear and try to think about it, and if there are some questions, you can ask. Sri Ramakrishna tells something very significant. Sri Ramakrishna is telling something very significant. Every word is important. I'll just read this, and next you try to think about what is mentioned here, and then this is Master Mashai's remarks based on what he saw Thakur as. How do we meditate on Thakur? We often, our meditation is so superficial, we don't know the real nature. Here's M is trying to give us an example using Thakur's own words. What is the true nature of Thakur? Are we meditating properly? Are we at least attempting to meditate properly? The answer to this question is in this beautiful explanation he gives, reconciling Sat Chit Ananda with Thakur. Without this, you cannot even think of meditating. It is said, now you will see every word is important. I'll explain this whole passage will be taken up in the next Sunday class because it requires at least 1 hour of explanation. And you see how nicely he has summed up the whole teachings of Thakur and made it into one and just explained in one paragraph. So I'll just read it this time and next time we will discuss. It is said, this is M who is telling now, based on Sri Ramakrishna's teaching. Nothing is his own. Everything he has heard from Sri Ramakrishna. It is said that the universe manifests itself in the great ocean of consciousness. Now, what do you mean? There is a great ocean of consciousness, like a big ocean, and the waves come. That is its manifestation. You see the waves. They are part of the consciousness, ocean of consciousness. But the moment you try to grasp the wave, it disappears. But has it gone? Was it unreal? It was real. It was there. So this consciousness is primary, but at the same time, for everybody, the waves are as real as the ocean. You can't think of the wave apart from the ocean. So, and then merges back into it in time. It is just a matter of time. Today, the ocean has produced a huge wave, and you see and you go and run and call somebody, oh, see, there's a huge wave. And by the time you have come back, it is placid water. The wave has subsided. So, in this whole universe, the play of Prakriti and Purusha is going on. We are trying to meditate on the Purusha, but somehow Prakriti just creates a huge wave and we try to grasp it and it vanishes. So that's what happens when we try to understand Thakur, understand any Ishta. We try to understand him and we think Thakur is this much. Oh, he is the person with that beard and he is with this wonderful eyes. We meditate for a long time. And then suddenly we see, we don't see that Thakur anymore. Suddenly he appears in a different form. That's why when Swami Brahmananda was asked to, there was when Belur Math was constructed, Swamiji was not there when it was completed. They ordered the statue of Thakur, and they tried their best using the photographs to make an exact replica in marble. But you know how difficult it is to. So when the statue was made finally, and Brahmananda was asked to see, because he was the Manas Putra of Thakur. He was so close and his meditation was also powerful. So they thought his opinion should be taken. Is it a fair likeness of Thakur? You know what Brahmananji said? He said, you want me to tell me whether this looks like Thakur? Which Thakur are you asking me about? I have seen him changing every second when he was alive. So now how can you put that Thakur in a marble statue which is going to remain steady for years and years together? So anyway, he says you go ahead, but you cannot grasp Thakur like that. That is what M is trying to tell. The great ocean of consciousness is Thakur. Satchidananda. Chit is the consciousness. And his existence, knowledge and bliss. And the moment you see some blissful aspect of Thakur, you try to catch it, it vanishes. Oh, you think Thakur is this much. Oh, Thakur is such a wonderful person. He did this, he did that. But that is only one aspect. That's why when Naren was asked, why don't you write a biography of Thakur? He said, how can I write? Which aspect of Thakur? It has infinite possibilities because he was infinite himself. So he says, a wave rises in the great ocean and then merges back into it. On the waves of this ocean of joy are an infinite number of waves. There is a big wave and there are small waves. And these are the small joys which we think when we experience them, we think we are above the cloud 9. We are so happy. Oh, what a wonderful joy I have. I got a lottery. I got millions of dollars. But they are all like small, minute wavelets of joy in the ocean of supreme bliss. Where is the beginning of this sport and where is its end? If you go to the ocean, that's why ocean is a very nice place to meditate. I used to sometimes go to the shore of the ocean and I was just wondering, many times I got that feeling. Does these waves which have been coming, how long these waves have been coming? In those days when we were very young, when we were children, we used to think. And we used to ask also sometimes our parents, will this wave stop? Because we have seen everything that we see around us has a beginning, has an end. We know the game begins and the game ends. But then the question arises, these waves are never ending. One after another, the waves are coming. So is there an end to this? Or that's what he says. The infinite number of waves are coming up and going in the consciousness, in Brahman. And Prakriti is bringing all these different forms and then merging back and then merging again, waves come. So where is the beginning of this sport and where is its end? It cannot be expressed in words. It cannot be thought by the mind. How little is man? How little is his mind? How small is his intelligence? It is said that the great saints have seen this eternal supreme person in the state of samadhi, not in an ordinary state. And they have witnessed the absolute sporting as the ever playful Lord. Now, this Thakur has given a wonderful example. He had this experience. We'll discuss about it in the next class. We are running short of time. This they have surely done because Sri Krishna also says so, but not with these physical eyes. They did it perhaps with what is called as the divine eye, Divya Chakshu, which Sri Krishna speaks of in the chapter 11 of the Gita. Getting this divine eye, Arjuna saw the universal form of the Lord. With this divine eye, the rishis realized the Atman. With this divine eye, Jesus saw his heavenly Father constantly. How can we get the divine eye? We have heard Thakur say that one can get it by the yearning of the heart. But how to have such yearning? Does one have to renounce the world? No, at least he did not say one has to renounce the world today. So there we end. Now we'll discuss. He discusses it in great detail what Thakur actually said. So this is the conclusion he comes to today, and we will discuss about this particular theme in the next class. If there are some questions, you can just ask. Yes, we can have a quick question or two. Are you able to hear me, all of you? Yes. Any question? So, Desiree, any question? How is everything in Brazil? Everything is okay in Brazil now?
Yes.
It's getting better and better.
Yes. Finally.
Finally. If there are no questions, then I'll take your leave. Oh, acha, somebody wants to ask. Are you not able to unmute yourself? Acha, there is a question from Dankruti Dolakia, and I'll read the question. She says, sometimes due to this sense of responsibility, a sting remains in our minds. How we may deal with it? Kindly read the question. I've read this question. So your question is, if I've understood it properly, if we assume the responsibility for our action, then sting means perhaps you mean that our conscience feels guilty. Either it feels that I've done some wrong. I've not because if I take the responsibility, then for every good thing I feel happy. For any bad thing, I also feel that I have done something wrong. It was my mistake. Now your question is how to deal with it, isn't it? Huh? How can we deal with it? Now that's what Sri Krishna is saying. God has deliberately given this responsibility because it is our ego which makes us feel that we are responsible. The only solution to deal with this is to lessen the ego. The lesser our ego, then we don't feel so responsible. We just tend to take things lightly. We see this whole drama of existence as a witness. Now we are not seeing this as we are getting involved. If something happens to somebody, we get involved. If something doesn't remotely concern us, we bother our heads about it and become sorrowful. Now, is God responsible for that? The sense of responsibility, no doubt, is if there is a genuine need, then you have to be responsible for your actions. You can't say, like Hajra was avoiding the responsibility of looking after his children and his family and saying that I want to meditate. Thakur said, no, you have given birth to those children, and now will the neighbors look after them? You have to look after them. So that responsibility is because he he was not free from the sense of ego. If he had no ego, like Narsim Mehta also had a daughter, he had a wife, he was a householder, but he had given up the ego, and Krishna did everything for him. If you see the beautiful life of Narsim Mehta, Sri Krishna even went and repaid the loan he had taken. Can you imagine? He had taken a loan just because his wife said, your daughter is not getting married, you have to spend some money, you're not earning anything. Now that responsibility was not there, but Sri Krishna took that responsibility because he loved Sri Krishna. His love for Sri Krishna was so much that ego was not there. So if the wife scolded him, he just did not bother. He just went and asked for a loan, as the Ramasville story which we heard. He he simply went and took money without understanding that the money lender is going to squeeze him. Money lender was very shrewd. He said, you have to stop singing the raga, Kedar Rag, in which he had received, Narsimha Mehta was a great saint. He was given a boon by his Ishta Shiva, saying that the moment you sing any song of Krishna in Kedar Rag, you will get his vision. And that was a wonderful thing for him. It was so dear to his heart that every day he used to sing. And his wife used to criticize him and said, you have a daughter, what about her marriage? You have to take the responsibility. So naturally, like Rama's will story, he also agreed to her request and uh, gave that Kedar Raga to the money lender, and he gave money and said, you should not sing this raga till you repay the money. Now, he was so innocent, he did not know that he will be deprived of the vision of Sri Krishna. And days passed. He naturally was not earning money, he could not repay it. Wife was happy because the girl was married off, the daughter was married off. She was happy that he finally took some money, and she was not bothered. But Narsim Mehta was so devoted to Krishna that Krishna felt that without my devotee, he was feeling restless. So Krishna appeared in the form of another Narsim Mehta. He took the form of Narsim Mehta and went and gave the money lender the money he owed. So you see, God can do so much for the disciple or for the devotee. And when Narsim Mehta said that I don't have money to, he said, no, you already come in the morning and given me. So here is your Kedar, now you can sing. And Narsim Mehta was so happy that God came in the guise of his own Narsim Mehta himself and released that bond or released that condition that he can sing in Kedar Rag so that he can have a vision of Sri Krishna. So that is what this incident teaches, that if you feel guilt, it is because that you have the agentship or you have that ego. We have the ego. So the only answer is we have to slowly, of course, we will not be totally egoless like Narsim Mehta, but at least the more we reduce our ego, the lesser our responsibility becomes. You see a child's ego. If the child does something, some mistake, you don't punish him like you punish an adult, because you say, oh, he's innocent, he doesn't have an ego, how does he know what is right, what is wrong? That is because the child is egoless. You don't blame a child, but you blame a person who is grown up, because he has a grown up ego, he has a well developed ego. So the more our ego becomes prominent, the more responsibility we need to take. That is why Sri Ram Krishna says you cannot realize God unless you have the nature of a 5-year-old child. That means your ego is so attenuated, it has become so small, or maybe it is so minute that it is not so harmful. And that is the only way where you can give up that sense of guilt, or otherwise you'll always feel guilty. The more the ego, the more guilt you will feel. And the more trouble you have, the more sorrow you have. So, am I clear? Is the answer clear?
Maharaj, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, Maharaj. It is wonderful to hear the explanations, and I think I mean, I understood what you said.
You got it, na? That is the goal, but of course it is difficult, no doubt. So the sense of responsibility will continue, but definitely it will become less and less as you go towards God. See, Thakur, the more he went towards God, the less the ego became and the less the responsibility. So mother took all the responsibility. If the mother sees that the child is taking all the responsibility, why will she bother? She says, okay, you are capable of doing everything yourself, go do. Only when the child cries, when he says, no, I'm helpless, that means it has given up the ego and he says, mother, no, you are all powerful. You are my mother. I sorry, it is because of my ego. I thought I can solve my problem. I can't solve it. Then mother comes to your help. Okay? I think that that has answered your question. Okay.
Yes, Maharaj. Yes.
So
Thank you.
yeah. Namaste. Sharon, what is your question? Okay. Now I'll read your question. There is one more question. Can you elaborate more on the causal mind? Now, because I very often mention this, many of you might not have. Causal mind is something where your samskaras are stored in seed form. So it is like a seed of a tree. The seed, you know that there is the whole tree inherent or inbuilt into that seed. But if you see the seed, you don't believe that one day it will become such a big tree. So that is how the causal mind is responsible for our subtle mind and for our gross existence also, ultimately. But we cannot see it because it is so fine, or maybe it is in seed form. So that is how we talk about the causal mind. There is no such thing as causal mind, the causal existence. It's part of the mind. The same mind can be at the subtle level. The mind can be gross also. Sometimes some minds are very gross. They're not even sensitive to anything. They are so physical that their mind changes according to the condition of their body. Whereas the finer the mind becomes, then you go to the level of buddhi. And even beyond the level of buddhi, Vijnanamaya Kosha, which I discussed, is the level of Karana Sharira or the Anandamaya Kosha, where the causal mind is present. It is the source of our mind, you can say, where our samskaras, where all our thoughts are compressed or maybe residing there in seed form, which are waiting to sprout. They have not yet sprouted. They have not yet become the mental waves. They have possibilities of the mental waves. There is a possibility that if your causal mind has a wonderful store of samskaras, there is a chance that you will have a wonderful mind, you will have a strong mind, you will have a peaceful mind. So the place where everything is stored is the causal mind. Okay. Now we come to the next question. Sri Sri Ma and Swami Virajanandji says, God is indifferent to whether we call on him or not. But equally, Thakur tells the devotee takes one step to him, he runs 10 to us. How to reconcile these polarities? Okay, it's a good question. Sri Virjan is telling people who have not yet begun sadhana. Even Ma says that, because she says, when somebody said, as if they are doing a great favor by calling, for such people, you have to see whom the statement was addressed. So there was, if people are very egoistic and they think that, oh, we are calling upon God and he's not responding out of egoism, if somebody says, as if we do in the world, that I have given you so many rupees, so you have to give back the necessary goods which I paid for. So with that business attitude, if you go, then Virajanji's and Ma's advice is valid, because he says whether you call him or not, you are not doing any favor. But if you call on him, Sri Ramakrishna is referring to those devotees who are really sincere, who want to call on him and who want to reach him, but they are not very sure that how long it will take to reach or to attain God. So that they don't lose hopes, Sri Ramakrishna is saying to them that just take one step and you see God will come 10 steps and help you. These are meant for sincere people. Whereas the first advice, you have to see the context. When Virajanji says he's answering a question, or when Mother says she is answering a question asked by a devotee who thinks I have done so much of japa and God is not really listening to my prayer and all those things. So it depends on who is asking this question. Okay. So that is, you have to see the context. So both are equally valid. One is applicable in one context, the other is applicable in another context. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
So I take your leave. Okay. Thank you.
Pranams, Maharaj.
Namaste. Namaste. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Pranam Maharaj.
Namaste. You are asking a question or just?
I'm doing pranam. I had a question, but we can
okay,
leave
fine,
it for next
fine.
week.
Yeah,
Leave it
yeah,
for
sure,
next
sure.
week.
No. We already answered 3 questions. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Maharaj.